The United States Senate Committee on Armed Services is, as the name would suggest, a committee of senators tasked with matters related to the armed services. During the Revolutionary War, before the United States declared independence, the colonists founded the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps. Once the conflict was over, the various branches disbanded. In 1789, with the creation of the executive branch, the American military began reforming itself to carry out the needs of the Department of War, including forming the Department of Navy and the Department of Military. At the time, Congress would form committees related to war only when the need presented itself. Upon the conclusion of the War of 1812, in 1815, it was clear that permanent military focus was needed to attend to the matters of war, and thus the Navy and the Military Affairs Committees were formed in 1816. At the conclusion of the Second World War, it was apparent that many aspects of Congress needed to be revitalized to meet the needs of America's new place in the global stage. This included disbanding the Department of War and replacing it with the Department of Defense. To meet these evolving requirements, Congress also introduced the Legislative Reorganization Act of 1946, which merged all previous committees related to war. The purpose of the Legislative Reorganization Act of 1946 was to streamline the functions of the legislative branch and how it interacted with the executive branch. This required removing and combining countless committees and programs with the intention of bringing greater focus into legislative actions. The result of this restructuring was a better defined roles and responsibilities for the executive branch. These defined objectives and parameters allowed for clear delineation of authority and areas of responsibility for all involved. Humorously, though the House, Senate, and White House had been Democratic majorities through the entirety of the war and its aftermath, once the war was over, the Red Scare mentality found many of the political framers no longer in office to apply the changes and alterations. Since the 1946 restructure, the 10 key areas of interest for the new Committee on the Armed Services have been maintained and updated to the current Congress. Those responsibilities are the aeronautical and later space activities pertaining to or primarily associated with the development of weapon systems or military operations, the Common Defense, the Department of the Defense, the Department of the Army, Department of Navy, and the Department of the Air Force generally, maintenance and operations of the Panama Canal, including administration, sanitation, and the government of the Canal Zone, military research and development, national security aspects of nuclear energy, the Naval Petroleum Reserves, except those in Alaska, the pay, promotion, retirement, and other benefits and privileges of members of the armed forces, including overseas education of civilians and military dependents, the service for a selective service system, and the strategic and critical materials necessary for the common defense. Within the Senate Committee on Armed Services, there are 7 subcommittees. Those subcommittees are the Subcommittee on Airland, which oversees and manages Army and Air Force assets, the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, which oversees and manages cyber assets and implementation, the Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities, which focuses on studying the geopolitical environment of the world, as well as military research and development. The Subcommittee on Personnel focuses on administrative and logistical needs of the military and its personnel. The Subcommittee of Readiness and Management Support, which dictates training for the troops, as well as the maintenance for the military equipment. The Subcommittee on Sea Power, which manages naval assets. And finally, the Subcommittee of Strategic Forces, which relates to nuclear assets. In January 2025, there were 6 bills that passed through the committee to the rest of the Senate. Due to the wide variety of areas and functions that the Committee of the Armed Forces manages, the diversity of these 6 bills are very representative of the myriad of unique and constant needs that the committee must give attention to. The bills for just January 2025 include a bill that allows firefighting departments to purchase military aircraft and parts, a bill that addresses the many service members relieved from the armed forces due to not receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. A bill to mandate programs that give greater recognition to women who served in combat roles. A bill that prevents the recruit training depot in Parris Island, South Carolina, that the Marines use from being closed. This was a consideration of previous administrations due to its frequent need of evacuation during hurricane season, as well as its frequent inability to integrate mixed gender training properly. A bill to recognize the anniversary of the headquarters of the Space Force being designated, and finally a bill to attempt to begin providing individuals held in Guantanamo Bay with greater means of recourse when they accept plea bargains. With so many responsibilities and areas of influence, it is no wonder that the interest groups that seek to gain the attention and support of the Senate Armed Services Committee are from countless industries and backgrounds themselves. Overall, the second greatest source of donations comes from securities and investment firms and companies, the third being lawyers and law firms, and the fourth is real estate. Of the top 20 greatest individual entities that contributed in 2024, only 3 of them were actually military industries, those being General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman. These 3 giants represent the vast majority of military research and development, as well as manufacturing of many military assets. Each one employs hundreds of American citizens within their locations that they operate, and often provide stable, well-paying jobs. Thus, their sway over government through the voters is substantial compared to their overall market share in the economy. In recent decades, with the lowering of global tension and the absence of the USSR, many of these industries have been forced to combine, thus entrenching them and their needs in American politics. The single greatest contributor to the committee in 2024 was the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee, as they hope to lobby for the continued involvement of the USA in the affairs of Israel, especially pertaining to Gaza and the Palestinian conflict. They also seek to ensure that the U.S. will continue to support Israel in its many conflicts with its neighbors. Big tech like Google and Microsoft are similar to those of the defense industry giants. Thus, it is always in their best interest to lobby the committee to gain greater appreciation for their contributions to the military. The same goes for the many in the communications sector who also have several contracts with the government related to national defense. The greatest PAC contributor to the committee advocates for women's rights and representation. They attempt to lobby for greater equality between the sexes within the military and Department of Defense. Finally, of interest is the Democracy Engine, as it skews the data as it relates to contributions. The Democracy Engine is a resource that allows thousands of individuals to donate small contributions and have these financial assets go directly to those they wish to support. The rest of the bigger contributions can be explained through understanding that the military has substantial impact on foreign policy and our domestic economy. Additionally, many who serve on the committee have vested interest in other areas that these lobbyists wish to inform. The greatest single contributing industry to the Armed Forces Committee, as well as many politicians, policies, and platforms, is that of the retired industry. To be listed under this group, one must be retired. But these individuals comprise some of the wealthiest and most easily organized citizens in the nation. While wealthy individuals certainly make a substantial contribution to the causes that they are passionate about, the greatest coalition of these donors can be found through groups such as the AARP and other organizations that represent the retired. These individuals are not only often able to have more assets to contribute to their causes, but they also generally have more free time on account of no longer having obligations. Within the committee, there are 27 members, 14 with the Republican majority and 13 with the minority. Of the minority, there are 12 Democrats and 1 independent. Each member is from a different state, except for the 2 Democrats who are from Michigan. Senator Roger Wicker is the committee chair. This position is given to the leader of the majority within the committee. He is often ex officio within the subcommittees, meaning that he participates but does not vote in them. He has prior military experience serving both active duty in the Air Force and within the Air National Guard. While not always relating directly to the armed services, much of his platform and policies revolve around national defense and health. He participates in other Senate committees relating to environment, infrastructure, foreign relations, and government administration. Additionally, he serves as a voting member of the Merchant Marine Academy as a member of their Board of Visitors. Like the committee chair, the ranking member represents the minority and also does not typically vote in the subcommittees. The current ranking member is Senator Jack Reed. He too has prior military service, but was in the Army and Army Reserves. His policy as a Democrat comes from a different approach than the majority and their committee chairman. Senator Reed's policies revolve around civic and community duties with special attention to healthcare and services for individuals, especially in contrast to corporations. While serving on the committee during the early years of the global war on terror, he was outspoken against then-President Bush for his invasion into Iraq, but also against the hasty abandoning of the nation after the United States had accomplished its goals, as he wished not to leave quite yet. Unlike the average member of the committee, he receives a substantial portion of his donations from the defense sector, and the other committees he is part of generally relate to economic affairs. Senator Tim Sheehy was elected to Congress for the first time in the most recent election, and thus is one of the most junior members on the committee. Overall, his donors are similar to the rest of his committee contemporaries. Like many on the committee, he has prior military service, having served in the Navy. Due to his recent arrival, he has not had nearly as many opportunities to demonstrate his voting habits within Congress. However, so far, he seems to vote in a manner that would be expected of a center-moderate Republican, being typically more liberal in his views than others in his party. Hailing from Montana, this stance well represents the overall feelings of his voting population. Being new to the Senate, the contributors to his career are primarily from Republican support funds and groups that advocate for issues that relate directly to problems that his district faces. For this reason, while some conflict of interests may be present between lobbyists and voters, the goals that his voters and these groups have often align. Thus, the senator has often met the expectations of both. From the minority group and a long-serving member of Congress, Senator Elizabeth Warren's top contributors diverge greatly from the expected norms of the committee. The primary reason for this is her involvement in many other areas and issues, with the Armed Forces Committee only taking a portion of her attention as she pushes policy. She, as a long-serving member of the Senate, has a track record of voting similarly to other liberal progressives. While not aligned with many other members of the committee, she votes in line with what her voters would typically expect. Her primary donors, making up a myriad of other industries, do not seem to have any expected conflicts with her political leanings as they relate to the Armed Forces Committee. Serving just as long as Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Angus King is one of the few independents within Congress and the only independent within the Armed Forces Committee. Like Senator Warren, Senator King also has countless other focuses, and his donors reflect that. Historically, Senator King typically finds himself agreeing on many issues with the Democratic Party, and as a result, often works more closely with them. In a few areas, especially relating to the Second Amendment and individual economic policies, he diverges from their habits and will work with Republicans. Where he is most unique is his behaviors and his tendencies to reach across the aisle and to work with moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans, serving as a bridge between the two factions, developing policy with the aim of compromising or meeting both parties' needs. His voting district is typically liberal, and his donors support him with that in mind. However, both groups also assume Senator King will take single-issue policies very seriously and with great attention. Due to this long service in Congress, His voting and policy proposal records align with these expectations. While it is clear that countless groups have a vested interest in the Senate Committee of the Armed Services, the way they advocate for these policies often overlaps with many other areas of government. The result of these myriad of platforms is that a wide array of diverse lobbying occurs from across the political spectrum. Decisions made by the committee often impact every aspect of American life. At the same time, the members of the committee come from all over the country and represent far more than just issues pertaining to the armed forces. The committee then sees parallel policy from all over the political spectrum, and its key issues overlap with many other committees and political platforms. While it has had a long history, the Senate Committee of the Armed Services has adapted to the changing environment of America and the world. This always developing climate requires collaboration from across America, and the Armed Forces Committee represents this meeting of ideas. As the world and nation continue to change, the committee will need to keep pace to fulfill best the needs of its voters, lobbyists, and countless responsibilities it has to the armed forces.